What's up, my friends? Welcome to the cave. Wow, it's really dark on there. Maybe I'll turn on the light. Hey, that's a little better, right? Welcome to Carpo's, Carpo's 5.0 super ninja style rational, irrational corner where I talk about just about everything on Earth and off Earth. Oh gosh, what am I thinking? Well, today's subject is somewhat tied into empathy, and I'm going to say first off that, it's been a really hot day. It was like, in the upper 90s today here, and in Portland that's pretty hot. Nobody here has AC. We don't have AC at home or in our car, so you just kind of deal with it. It comes and goes. Maybe a week of heat, but you don't generally only get about a week of really hot weather in the middle of summer, if anything. Sometimes two, but whatever. Portland style, that's just how it is here. And I love where I live. And I guess I should tie that into the video, which is about empathy. And sometimes we forget that when we live in a nice place, a place that's comfortable, a place that we feel safe, it's easy to blow off the rest of the world and think, well, they live where they live. I guess the example that comes to mind is Louisiana. A couple of months ago, I was researching New Orleans, and I wanted to know more about the levees that broke, why they broke, how much money it cost to replace them. And I was a little bit taken back by the amount to even simply maintain it. I believe it was like $5 million per person, per resident of New Orleans, in order to maintain this levee, which cost something like $50 billion to build, if I recall correctly. Point being, it was very expensive, and that the keys were basically handed over to the city. And I started thinking, well, they've already said that within the next century that the oceans will rise at least enough to flood Miami within another 100 years. And New Orleans is going to be in the same predicament. But hold on one second. I'm getting summoned. I have a dual job. I've got to be a dad, make videos. So Louisiana got themselves, they have a serious problem down there, and I'm not going to say they got themselves into it, but it's easy to empathize with the people who lost their homes, and on the other hand, say, well, why the hell are you moving back there? To lose your homes in the first place is one thing. But honestly, me trusting a seawall to keep my house protected, to me, in my opinion, that is ludicrous. Like, I'm already a little bit wary about living near an ocean just because of a possibility of a tsunami or, sneaker wave even taking your kids away. It's dangerous out there. And people just kind of take it for granted. And, it's a danger that you are willing to take. But if you're willing to live in a place like that and then move back to it and then have to get bailed out again at the taxpayers, out of our pockets, it leads people to start to say, hey, I don't want to bail other states out when they have a problem. But on the other hand, this is why we have a union. This is why we have states. It's because if one state's suffering, we're supposed to help each other out. So my whole point here is to say, there's a certain amount of empathy that we want to have for other people who suffer in other places. I know that I live in a nice place that's comfortable. But I also know that I've stayed here because of the reason that it's comfortable. And perhaps my parents were smart enough to move here. Or, my father grew up in Chicago, and it was very industrial, very polluted area. And, he wanted to move out here, and he did. And he loved to go up to the mountains and go hiking and whatnot. And I was raised here, so this is what I know. So it would be easy for me to say, yes, I've just grown up here, so that's all I know. And but I know that there are more beautiful places around the world. I know that there are phenomenal places to live. I guess I also know that no matter where you live, it's not always about the place that you live, but the state of mind that you have about it. You know, living in the city to some people is heaven, to other people it's just, ugh, I can't stand it. And I think that a lot of people just tolerate, you take the road of acceptance. You know, you're willing to just accept your fate, your lot. But for people who grew up in the country, you know, moving to the city can be a big shocker. But the empathy that we have for others, because I don't want to get too far off track here talking about where we live. It's not just about, you know, the places that we grow up or our circumstance. You can feel the same empathy for your next door neighbor because you know that they're beaten by their parents or that they have, you know, just had a rough childhood. There are certain things that people have in their lives that are, let's say, these just major hurdles they have to overcome, and sometimes you can help them out. Say they need a few bucks or they need to borrow a car or a ride or whatever it might be for a while. But other times there are people who need help that you cannot give, and that's the toughest one. It seems to be the one I run into the most. I don't find that people really need me to, you know, help them financially or otherwise. It's often, but if I can, I will, or give them some weed or whatever it might be. But when it comes down to, you know, people needing emotional help, that's a lot harder because you're not quite sure what to say. You know, sometimes they just want somebody to talk to, but that's difficult to listen if you don't know how to contribute. But you know, I do think a lot of people play the victim, and that makes it even harder to have empathy because to a degree there are people who really do have major things going on in their life, major problems. You know, people who, you know, were in a severe accident and they can't feel their legs, or they're just lost their entire family. And of course it's all in perspective, but in that perspective, thinking about just your ticket that you got, or somebody who was mean to you at the grocery store, or, you know, a problem that your brother or your cousin's having that's not even relative to you at all. It's easy to get wrapped up in these things and play the victim and kind of reap the drama because we don't want to just deal with the fact that, well, take life for what it is, you know. We all have problems. We all suffer. It's just life. You know, what do you do? I think that's the main acceptance, is to be able to just accept that. That we all need to empathize for each other. I think if we all have enough empathy for each other, it can change the whole perspective, the whole paradigm. And we should feel sorry for each other merely for being human, for having to deal with this craziness that they call life, you know, because we all live it. You know, so many things happen to us that we can play the victim on or complain about. I mean, I have a million things. Hell, today half of one of my teeth fell out. But, you know, you get shit taken care of, or you don't, whatever. We're all responsible for our own actions or inactions. And so it's easy to have empathy for people who need it. For those who place blame or victim play, it's much more difficult. But it's also much more difficult for people who have made bad decisions. Like I say, you know, people who decide to live in Louisiana, they've made that choice. And if they want to move into New Orleans because of the nostalgia, they've made that choice. It doesn't mean that every family made the choice to move into a floodplain. Many people are very poor, and that's where they grew up. But that's the difficult philosophy for me. That's what I'm trying to stir up. That's the point of interest. We can sit and go, oh, boo-hoo, poor New Orleans people, or we could stand here and say, oh, screw all them. They should deal with their own problem. But I want to get in and really realize the depth of it and say, you know, who should we empathize for and why? And is there a certain degree of humanity, of idiocy or lunacy or ignorance that we have to stand up and say, I'm not going to fund this, I'm not going to be part of this, you know. Because this is why, say, extreme right-wingers are so angry at the system, because that's why it seems like people who say support Trump don't have empathy. I'm not saying they don't, I'm saying it seems like they don't. It's because they're angry and they're hostile and they're misplacing their anger towards other Americans instead of on the whole system at play, the whole system that is consuming itself. And I think that it's just that people have empathy for different things, but I can also see why right-wingers, say, get very angry at giving away, say, even Social Security, even though Social Security is something that's owed to the people who have paid for it. It frustrates people because of how much it actually costs this country. If you really look at the cost, when people say military spending is where all our money goes, military spending is a lot of our tax dollars, but it doesn't even compete with healthcare. And this is why healthcare is a big issue. And that's one of the most empathetic areas that we need to focus on, because we need to care about one another. But we also realize it costs a lot of money. How do you win an argument like that? How do you win a debate on what's right and what's wrong, you know? So I think, which brings me to originally here, the point that I was originally going to mention in this video, but I'd completely forgotten until now, which was, you know, it was about empathogens, things like MDMA or ecstasy, and how useful they really are for giving people a new perspective and an empathy for others in their situation. You know, if you show somebody a video of people suffering in a normal state, a person who really doesn't care much, they might not, you know, shrug their shoulder and say that sucks. Under the influence of certain psychedelics or MDMA, a person will see those same things and yet feel a strong bond and understanding towards people in their own plights, as well as the ability to see within themselves. And by seeing their own faults, they're able to see the faults in others. And that's the key aspect here. Once we've seen the faults in others, we can admit that we have our own. Or rather, vice versa, maybe once we've seen our own, we can admit that the faults in others and ourselves are okay. And it's not going to kill us to be wrong once in a while, you know. As painful as it may be to admit we're wrong sometimes. But the reason I'm mentioning psychedelics is somebody this morning on one of the videos, it was a psyched substance. He does videos about psychedelics and trips and whatnot. And I left a comment on there. And somebody responded to my comment, and part of his comment said, you know, hey, I like your videos, Carpo, you should do more, you know, trip reports. And I thought about it for a minute, and I explained to him that the reason I don't is because I feel almost guilty talking about psychedelics online, because I don't want to give any young people the wrong impression that they should go out and just try these things, because that's something I'm very cautious about. And, you know, I make sure that I try not to. I try to, if I do a video like that, I try to put the age restriction on it. And for what it's worth, I mean, you know, I know better. But kids are going to do what kids are going to do. And I tried psychedelics at a young age, but I don't want to promote that. And I want to be careful about what I say. But one of the more crucial components I said was that the last few times I've taken these psychedelics or empathogens, they've seemed to, or empathodelics, you know, I don't know, call it whatever you want. They make you feel, they make you better understand yourself and your world, but after you've taken them for a while, if you've been listening carefully and you've been paying attention, and this is where I'm at least in my mind, that they've kind of told me that, pat me on the shoulder every time and say, hey, you know, yeah, this is enlightening, but these are things that you've already learned. You need to move on and kind of do this on your own. So the psychedelics, I still feel, are very necessary for me to reconnect with that empathy every, say, 6 months or so, which is about the amount of time as often that I do it. And even then I sometimes think, oh, I'm overdoing it, and I always take small amounts. The interesting thing about that video this morning was that, you know, all these weird coincidences always happen like this. The psyched substance video was entitled Nexus Flipping. And Nexus for those who don't know, flipping is when you take more than one substance at a time. Candy flipping is taking MDMA and LSD. Okay, hippie flipping is taking MDMA and psilocybin mushrooms. Nexus flipping is taking MDMA and 2CB. 2CB was a compound that was popularized by Shulgin. Alexander Shulgin died a while back, but he was the chemist who popularized MDMA, and I believe he popularized 2CB, but from what I understand, it's a mescaline extract or a synthetic version. Anyhow, there are many tribes in Mexico who actually prefer 2CB over their natural, cacti or whatever they were taking before, because they believe it gets them more in touch with their spirits. This is because 2CB acts like a psychedelic and an empathogen. And so nexus flipping is when people take MDMA and then towards the end, or a couple hours in, they take the 2CB. And supposedly that combination at that level and those dosages seem to boost each other, boost the empathogenic effects, and rekindle that feeling from the Molly, and at the same time give you some wild visuals that help you to assess. Because the thing about visuals on psychedelics is they help you to put a picture to what your mind is trying to tell you. It's not that you're seeing the truth, seeing the future, seeing beings or hallucinations that are like people just who haven't been there don't quite understand. But it's more like things that are already there morph into things that your mind is considering subconsciously. So the visuals are very helpful to process if you're paying attention. And, but the empathogenic effects are really where it's at. And so, since I've talked about this, I want to say, as a disclaimer, I'm not promoting any psychedelic use, and I would say if a person's going to, be prepared for some rough times if you want to really get a medicinal benefit out of it. You know, it's not like taking a light dose and going out raving and dancing. It's like taking enough to work and then laying on your couch and really going inside and doing some serious soul searching. And if you choose to do something like that, you owe it to yourself to do it that way. The first time, at least, to know what you're really in for. And I think that with psychedelics, we can help to understand our minds better as to which keys that we can open up in our own minds to possibly release those endogenous compounds which are similar. So, for example, DMT is produced by our brains, and in our bodies, we know this. People will talk about the pineal gland. It's really irrelevant because DMT is produced all over the body, and by the gut probably. Serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, all these things are produced in the gut as well. And I believe probably acetylcholine is probably produced in the gut too. The whole body reacts as a giant reactor. It's all electrical. It's all working on this big circuitry. It's not that your brain has these chemicals that are produced right in the brain and then used. Your whole body can work as a system together. So my belief is this is why taking certain psychedelics at certain times can offset, alter, or change the reactions. Some combinations seem to cancel each other out. Other combinations seem to be amazingly wild, like say taking nitrous oxide with a psychedelic. That to me is just mind-blowing. And I've eaten mushrooms and Molly, I've done hippie flipped and then smoked DMT into the stars. I've gone to deep places, but nothing quite like nitrous. Because it's not about how out of it you are, how far you are, how much you're hallucinating. It's about what kind of things you're seeing. So, I've seen a lot of really strange things in my time. And brought a lot back, but also a lot was lost to being a little too out of it. So anyway, but sorry, I got off track there. DMT is produced by the brain and the body. It's also something that we consume. Hold on, I'll be right back. I got so far into it, now I'm going to have to go. DMT is produced by the body, and it's also a substance we consume. And it's orally inactive unless you take it with an MAOI, because your body has a monoamine oxidase, which is an enzyme that breaks it down. before it reaches your bloodstream significantly. So by taking an MAOI, you stop that enzyme and allows you to take it and use it as a psychedelic, and this is what ayahuasca is. Smoking DMT doesn't require that. It hits you so quick that it's a mind-blowing experience, but my point here is that it's such a life-changing experience for some people, yet it's something that's produced by the body. So my thought is that these other compounds, there are theories that perhaps our body produced them naturally, endogenously at one time, like psilocybin or LSD, or perhaps something like that. But I don't believe that. I believe that psilocybin and LSD and other compounds, they're very similar in structure to serotonin, and serotonin is our reality compound. So we're just tuning into a different frequency, a different reality. You don't have to get scientific about it to know that it's quite an amazing experience. So anyway, I'm going to have to go because I can tell that the kids are getting restless. So I'll talk